So we know that there could be some days right before ovulation where you feel super strong, and you'll find that in your patterning. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to go have a really high training stress load on this day. And then there could be days after ovulation or a few days before your period starts that you feel really flat. And when you understand that that's your normal pattern, it allows you to schedule in recovery, allows you to schedule in a technique day, gives you permission to back down and back off. Because if you don't understand that, unfortunately, a lot of women still rely on that negative self-talk. You're not hard enough, you're not strong enough, right? It's my fitness sucks, what's going on? But really, it's just the way that your hormones are affecting every system of your body.
Dr. Stacey Simms is a globally respected exercise physiologist and nutrition scientist who is an expert in women's health and physiology. She is the author of the book Roar and known for her work in developing training and nutrition strategies that are specific to female physiology, coining the phrase, "Women are not small men." Her career includes positions at Stanford University and AUT University, and she has authored over 100 peer-reviewed research papers. It's so awesome to have you on the show. Thank you very much. I have been a trainer, a gym owner for the last 11 years and training people of all kinds for 20 plus years. And I haven't touched women's, the science of training, the physiology, and we know you're the authority. So with that, I just wanted to start off by giving people a brief understanding of your education and your background before we begin to dive into different subjects.
Yeah.
So please.
So I did my PhD in environmental conditions, looking at the differences of hydration between men and women in the menstrual cycle. So that was kind of like the tipping point. But prior to that, I did my master's in overtraining in female endurance runners. My whole academic career has been looking at sex differences in training and nutrition and environmental conditions. And so that's kind of been the focus. And I ended up doing my postdoc at Stanford and had the fortunate opportunity to have one hand in public health and one hand in human performance, being able to merge the two and seeing, what resonates in people who are just looking to optimize their health versus who's looking to optimize their Olympic performance. And there is some cross correlation, right? So it's really taking a book out of, or a page out of the book of high performance and saying, how can we apply it to general pop, but also what of it is appropriate for women that we're seeing that's happening in men.
Understood. So there's, over the years, it's women are competing, men are competing. I think just giving a general, not aside from the obvious, the basic scientific differences between the physiology of men and women.
I mean, I think it's really interesting that this conversation comes up so much now because we've been talking about it for years. And we see, there are differences from a molecular level in utero where we're seeing that if a woman is highly stressed and she's pregnant with a male fetus, most often that pregnancy will end in a miscarriage. But if she is pregnant with a female fetus and highly stressed in a stress environment, the fetus becomes more robust and stress resilient, and there is no miscarriage. So we're seeing from a molecular level in utero that there are sex differences. After birth, there are still sex differences from XX versus XY and things like muscle morphology, fueling, ability to carry hemoglobin. And then when we get to puberty and we have the expression of our sex hormones, there's even a greater divergence. So when we start looking at all of the things that create what XX versus XY is, because we don't have enough research to go outside of the binary, we see that from that basic XX, there are inherent cellular processes that are different into whole body systems. So as we start these conversations and start going, okay, well, what about brain health? And what about cardiovascular health? We see that we have not only the XX deviation, but also the expression of our steroid hormones and how that affects every system. So when we start talking about exercise, it makes sense that these molecular and whole body systems would respond differently after you take consistency out of the conversation.
That segues nicely into a difference in fat storage, a difference in the overall capacity of the heart and lung function, correct?
Yes. So, I mean, women are born with a smaller heart and lungs, relative to a similar body-sized man.
Hmm.
And we look at lean mass. We know that men have more lean mass. That includes bone density as
Hmm.
compared to women. There's a study I was reading yesterday looking at VO2 max and wondering, is VO2 max, and we're looking at from a relative perspective, does it really come down to fat-free mass and lean mass and oxygen delivery? It doesn't. It comes down to the female being less capable of carrying oxygen because of less hemoglobin. So even when you take out the relative body comp differences, there's still a sex difference because of the differences in hemoglobin and hemoglobin carrying capacity.
Okay. Okay. Understood. So, I mean, if you take, I guess, overall size, 120-pound male, 120-pound female, just because of the capacity and the size of the heart, you're still going to have limitations there, regardless of the overall body structure, not the organ structure, but the body structure and the weight. You're still going to have limitations because of the capacity of the heart and the size of the heart itself, correct?
Correct. Yep,
Okay.
exactly.
Understood. Understood. So also the ability to build muscle, and I am in Miami, Florida. We have, I think it's emerging, the culture of fitness competitors, figure competitors, bodybuilders. I know it was big in the 80s and maybe the 90s, and it kind of trickled away, but I feel like there's almost somewhat a resurgence, at least in Miami. I feel that. With the ability for a female to uh, make muscle or improve their overall muscle tone, it's also there's a significant difference. Could you please share on that? And then I do want to ask you about the longevity and the health of bodybuilding and figure competitors as well. But I guess first the ability to build muscle.
Yeah, so when we're looking at our reproductive years, so that's, into puberty up through our mid 30s, we have estrogen, and estrogen really does help with the lean mass, specifically muscle development, as well as muscle contractile strength and power development. So we can use pretty much a standard kind of program that we see, periodized program, pyramid schemes, whatever sets reps you want to use when we're in our reproductive years with a relatively healthy hormone profile. The caveat that's coming out now is the rest time. We're seeing that women are less fatigable. So if we're really trying to eke out additional training stress, we might not need as much recovery between sets. So that's the early stage development and investigations that were coming out now. But as we start to get older, it becomes inherently harder to build lean mass. One of the first things that go is strength and power. We see this in women who are in their mid to upper 40s, or sorry, mid 30s to early 40s. It's the early perimenopausal time point because there's a dysregulation of myosin. So we know that myosin is one of those contractile proteins that's really responsible for strong muscle contraction, and it has to do with estrogen fluctuation. So if we're really trying to build strength, power, and lean mass or get some hypertrophy, we really need women in their late 30s, early 40s onwards to focus on that power based end. Because when we start really focusing on time under tension, we start focusing on the lower reps, the heavier workloads, really focusing on that power based end, we're able to build and maintain power and strength without having to rely on estrogen. So then this feeds us forward that if we are able to do those explosive movements and we're able to build that strength, hypertrophy comes with it. So this is where we start to get in the nuance of, okay, how are we scoping a program for a woman who's in her mid 30s onwards? We have to look at all the different kinds of things that are coming out now with like French contrast training or reverse pyramid and not really getting into the typical hypertrophy sets. So we start looking at going to fatigue, and we start seeing the high reps to fatigue. It becomes more of a metabolic stress, and women don't need that. because that is not how we're going to get hypertrophy. Because we're under a metabolic stress during exercise, then we see this inherent breakdown of the lean mass and more of a distilling of the amino acids instead of uptaking and going, we need the signal to build tissue. So that's where we start to see this nuance of how are we actually building lean mass and getting that hypertrophic effect when we start getting older.
Very interesting. It almost goes against all the beliefs of like traditional periodization and bodybuilding programs and hypertrophy reps and sets, meaning it's not, you said women don't need that. It's not even necessary to get to reap those rewards or benefits. Is that correct?
As we get into peri and post menopause, exactly.
Okay.
We need to
Okay.
really focus on how are we staying below 8 reps? What can we
Hmm.
do in that 8 reps or less scheme to build power, strength, and that actual lean mass?
Hmm. And I would say that there is, maybe it's a good time to get into, there's, maybe it's based off of lack of information or knowledge or awareness in the sciences, but there is still a fear, I believe, in most females who maybe aren't in the know of doing lower rep sets, heavier weight, right?
Getting bulky.
I mean,
That's the
let's
one of the
be honest.
fears, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a
Go
total
ahead.
fear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Part of it also as we have to look at like our somatotype, right? So if you are more inclined to build muscle mesomorphic, of course, it's not going to take much to actually put that lean mass on. But it is incredibly difficult to put on and keep lean mass when you get to your mid 30s onwards as women.
Hmm.
For men, it
Hmm.
hits, maybe in your mid 50s onwards. And
Hmm.
it is an inherent change in metabolism and hormone profile. And we're becoming more and more anabolically resistant to both protein and resistance training itself. So we have to mix it up if we want to keep progressing.
Hmm. Understood. It's so interesting because if I basically applied that, it's kind of giving people what they absolutely need by, and also giving them what they kind of want so you can gain their trust and then work them into the lower rep sets. I'm going to be honest with you. In the last 20 years, I think I may have come across one female client that was like all in to do whatever I say. And even if you show them the data, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's irrelevant. They are just have such a great fear of getting, as you said, bulky. Um, but I think now we're transitioning a little bit, and people are just more aware of the science and more aware of the information. And I think it serves everyone. You don't have to do sets of 12 or 15 or just burn out sets to get what you need.
Correct. And
Yeah.
that's the big thing. It's like women who grew up in the, were hit with the 90s of calories in, calories out, the
Hmm.
toning,
Hmm.
and maybe like the firm aerobic workout with weights back in the day.
Hmm.
They're very much afraid of lifting things heavier. And so we have to
Hmm.
phase them into it and go, okay, well, we want to learn how you move first. What do you like? So it becomes a safe environment. And I often tell women, it's a right to lift heavy and it's a journey. It might take you a year to be able to lift a good heavy 3 or 4 properly. So
Yeah.
don't expect to be able to go from one day lifting a 50-kilo deadlift to 2 weeks later doing 100 kilos because that's
Hmm.
setting you up for injury, for fear, and just completely hating the gym.
Hmm. Hmm. And do you think, as you said before, I picked up on, you said that the female has a longer period to fatigue. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
But that's
So,
within sets, and I'm sorry to interrupt, within sets
no,
in
no.
the workout, not necessarily between workouts.
Right. So if we're looking at a 5 by 5, and normally we might say a 5 by 5 on the 2 or 3 minute, right?
Hmm.
And we're seeing more and more that when women hit that 2 minute or 2 minute 10, then that would be optimal to start it again and not wait the full 3 minutes because
Hmm.
we're seeing a lot of women who are waiting the full 3 minutes in a 5 by 5 set end up heart rate's too low, they've lost the warmth, their joints start to
Hmm.
hurt, so the
Hmm.
next five they're not able to lift the weight, they're not able to increase the weight, so they're having a real difficult time progressing. But if we shorten that recovery between the sets, they're able to nail it. But when we're
Hmm.
talking about recovery day to day, we see that we need more as we get older. Both men and women need more because the body is less resilient and needs a little bit more time to
Hmm.
repair.
Hmm. Okay, that's very helpful. So, would that also, I have so many questions, but would that also fall into the realm of sleep as well? Do women
Yes.
traditionally need more sleep?
It's not necessarily more sleep. We see that there's a circadian rhythm difference between men and women. So, men's circadian rhythm is a little bit longer than women's. So, the melatonin rise and subsequent peak is different. So, if we're seeing women who are trying to stay up with their male partner and watch TV or connect and they're getting to bed later than 10, they have a really difficult time getting into a deep, slow wave sleep because they've missed the onset rise of melatonin. And a lot of women wake up between 3 and 4 and can't get back to sleep. And that's because they've hit that melatonin peak and they haven't really gotten into our slow wave sleep. So it's interrupting the sleep architecture. So if we're able to get to bed consistently between 9 and 10 and then wake up consistently when we need to, and we keep that across the week, then we see that the sleep phases end up being really sound. Women start to sleep better. And if they're having problems sleeping, we have to look at the sleep hygiene prior to. But I always tell people, regardless of gender or sex, we have to really nail sleep because you cannot get any kind of body composition change or any increase in stress resilience if you are not adequately sleeping.
So that means you're getting 8 hours,
Between 7 and 8, yeah,
7 and 8, with consistency, same time, same patterns.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Understood. Understood. Is there a more optimal time for a female to train as opposed to a male? Or is it very specific to the person?
Well, we have what's ideal, right? And then we have what's reality. So when I'm
Mm,
talking about ideal, we're looking at the research and we see that for women who want to mobilize more abdominal fat and get more strength, then we tend to see that earlier morning exercise sessions and strength training sessions is the way to go. If you're someone who's trying to work more on a metabolic control, then it's in the evening. For men, it doesn't matter. But that's
okay.
optimizing. We first need people just to be consistent and progressive.
Right. Consistency. Okay. Excuse me. With that, I had a girlfriend in college who suffered a knee injury as a freshman. And then she suffered. I know the percentages go up once you suffer one. The tendency or probability of getting another one is extremely high. And then we started to research, and the doctor told her basically because the way the hips sit outside the knees for childbearing purposes and the structure of the body, they're more susceptible to ACL injuries. Is that true? Has that gone up or has that gone down based on like the education of training and just being more understanding of what the needs are of women in training?
It still holds true and it
Hmm.
is part of the knee angle, but the other part is women tend to be quad dominant. So a lot of the programming, just the generic programming, is still more quad forward. And there's less of an emphasis on hamstring strength, not deadlift hamstring strength, but like through the middle range,
Hmm.
posterior chain activation, the pivoting and rotational movements. So when we
Hmm.
start really working posterior chain to get women really strong, it reduces that ACL risk.
Okay. I feel like that, and I know quad dominant, you certainly would know more than I, but I feel that over the years, the posterior chain has reemerged with like glute, hamstring, lower back. I mean, it's been attacked more and more and more just to, I guess, in performance and strength and conditioning. But I feel like it's not as neglected or still as neglected.
In Well, when we look at like Fitspo type stuff, we're seeing that it
Hmm.
is not neglected. We have like
Hmm.
the booty labs and things like that.
Yeah, yeah,
And right, so that's good.
yeah.
But in sport performance, we're seeing a lot of things that aren't uptaken. We see it like the glute posterior chain stuff is really well known in outside of high performance sport until someone gets injured. And then they're
Hmm.
like, okay, we really have to work on posterior chain. It's
Okay.
still primarily like a 3 day split where you have the quad dominant knee hinge, and then you have a push pull, and then you have posterior chain and
Hmm.
even warm ups and stuff for things like soccer or rugby or other cutting motions. They're not paying attention to warming up and activating posterior chain. So those are the things that are in play to change.
That's very interesting. Very interesting. Now, would you say is there a specific sport that I know with the lateral movement, I guess you'd say more frontal with soccer aggressive cuts. Is there a specific female sport that has the most knee injuries?
I think it depends on where you come from because, like in
Hmm.
New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, you have netball, and there's a high incidence of knee injuries in netball.
What
And
is that?
I know exactly, right?
I don't know
It's
what
a
that is.
yeah. So it sort of looks like basketball, except you cannot run with the ball. So you are running and pivoting and jumping and passing. So it's a big pass and cut. So there's a
Hmm.
high incidence of ACO, MCO injury in netball. When you take that out, because no one really knows what it is, then
Hmm.
we're seeing soccer, lacrosse. Those tend to
Okay.
be the big ones that follow.
I would think, I mean, when I go over it, I know it's limited movement and you're in a very clear or small area of space. But I was thinking with the serves for volleyball or jumping up because we know it's a landing issue. I was thinking maybe volleyball because I've seen some of the heights and the verticals on some females and it's just extraordinary. But I thought volleyball may be up there.
There's a lot of emphasis on landing mechanics now in volleyball, and
Hmm.
they tend to work a lot on that, which reduces their knee injuries.
Hmm. Okay. Um, so we were speaking about bodybuilding before, and now we're talking about athletics. I feel they used to do these studies with football. They used to say men's football, American football. They used to
Hmm.
say there is no sport that shows a direct, and I don't know if this data was true, but they say if you have a low body fat, that doesn't mean you're going to be great at the sport. And when they used to show pictures of defensive linemen who are fleet-footed and super athletic and move insanely agile. But then I started to see that now strength coaches they want their athletes stronger, faster, leaner, which is all great, but I feel like training peak season, when you're training, the body fat's low, the strength is high, much like bodybuilding or a female figure competitor. They're up, they're down, there's a lot of fluctuation in the weight in the body fat in season, off season, or heavy training cycle of strength conditioning, and then a low training cycle where they kind of have some time off and they put some weight on and their body fat isn't that low. What are the ramifications or long-term damage to maybe a female figure competitor for physique or any athlete going up and down or person just in fluctuation with body weight and body fat?
Well, it depends on how much that they are changing, right? So, Trent Stellingworth from Canada, his wife is a professional Olympian runner. And so he has all this data and presented it showing like how body fat and weight went up and down across the season, and she was fine. Killer there was that she was never in low energy availability. So, regardless of if you're a man or woman, if you're in low energy availability, this is where we start to see dysfunction that can cause issues. We see
Okay.
hormone and endocrine dysfunction. If you're
Mhm.
able to stay out of low energy availability when you are cutting, then you're fine. When you are coming out and you put a little bit more weight on, your body's kind of recovering and it's fine. So we just have to be careful of that energy availability across season and postseason and making sure that we're not having too much of a fluctuation because when people are coming off season and it's like, shit, it's preseason, I have to lean up. They start cutting calories, increasing training, they get into low energy availability and they start getting fatigued. We start seeing soft tissue injuries, then we start seeing endocrine dysfunction, and that's where we start having a big quagmire of issues.
And so it certainly makes them more susceptible. The immune system suppressed, they're more susceptible to
Mm-hmm.
injuries. You said soft tissue injuries. Is there also a correlation to more glucose sensitivity as compared to male athletes?
There is across the menstrual cycle, we're seeing that
Okay.
women who tend to have more PCOS or tendencies or higher testosterone content or count end up having greater insulin resistance and about the 5 to 7 days before their period starts, but it's very transient. So
Okay.
you're having issues with carbohydrate and feeling like, oh, it's not quite working so well, then just get tested. And it's
Mhm.
not that you're going to be in a pre-diabetic range. It's just
Right.
you have to be aware that maybe we need to change the kind of carbohydrates that we're eating. But overall, we're looking at the body weight fluctuation. There isn't that much that's really coming into play unless a woman has PCOS.
Hmm. Okay. And PCOS for our listeners?
Oh, that's polycystic ovarian syndrome. So it's a condition where you have a higher amount of androgen, so higher amount of testosterone and DHEA. Your eggs don't develop fully, and you have really erratic, irregular periods. And it is a condition that is in the same category as endometriosis. Not a lot of research, but there is some
Hmm.
things that you, or are some things that you can do:
Hmm.
anti-inflammatory diet, watching what kind of carbohydrates you're eating to really normalize the effects of PCOS.
So I've heard horror stories of endometriosis. Is it, I guess it makes it more, increases the effects, makes it more dramatic or inflames your system if you have a high carbohydrate diet. Is that correct?
If you have simple carbs,
Simple,
but if
simple.
yeah, but if we're
Okay.
going with our fruits or veg or whole grains, that helps with our gut microbiome, which helps with
Hmm.
our sex hormone metabolism and all our vitamin production. So it's like, let's not be afraid of carbohydrates, but let's look at what kind we're eating and go towards the complex carbohydrate.
Hmm. Okay. Um, so maybe it's a good time now to walk us through, the menstrual cycle and maybe best training practices on when to train hard, give your best, be more forgiving on your system, get little bit more rest, when to ease off, when to push a little bit harder.
Yeah, so if you had asked me this 5 or 6 years ago, I would have said from molecular data, we see that low hormone is the time to push hard, and after ovulation, a high hormone phase, this is where we want to pay attention, how you're feeling, that kind of stuff. But the caveat there is every woman's cycle is different between cycle to cycle within herself and from woman to woman. So the best practice we see now is to track your cycle with your sleep and your training. So we know that there could be some days right before ovulation where you feel super strong, and you'll find that in your patterning. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to go have a really high training stress load on this day. And then there could be days after ovulation or a few days before your period starts that you feel really flat. And when you understand that that's your normal pattern, it allows you to schedule in recovery, allows you to schedule in a technique day, gives you permission to back down and back off. Because if you don't understand that, unfortunately, a lot of women still rely on that negative self talk. You're not hard enough. You're not strong enough, right? It's my fitness sucks, what's going on? But really, it's just the way that your hormones are affecting every system of your body. So we say tracking about 3 cycles to get a really good kind of handle on your own individual variation, and then start working within that schematic to see where you should be putting in your heavier loads and other times you should be backing off.
There is a large percentage of the female population that still wants to truly be skinny and has maybe a phobia of proper, I hate to say the word fueling, but proper nutrition to make sure that they're getting their needs met. What have you
Mm-hmm.
experienced and what are you hearing within your circle and what have you seen working with the female population?
It's definitely something that's still out there. And unfortunately, now that we have the Ozempic communities and
Hmm.
we see ballerina skinny back in, we have microdosing, it's becoming more of a problem again.
Hmm.
So the way that we've unpacked it is really talking about fueling for your training and fueling for the day. And people
Hmm.
bring up fasting, intermittent fasting. It's like, well, no, we want to bring it back down to our circadian rhythm. And the biggest ways that we change our circadian rhythm is with light and dark and with eating, our food exposure. So if you're really trying to nail sleep, and you're really trying to nail recovery, you have to work with your circadian rhythm, because it's not just about sleep. It's about the hormone pulses that occur on a regular 24-hour cycle. So we're talking about luteinizing hormone or cortisol responses or estrogen or testosterone, all of these things. So if you are not fueling adequately, then you are interrupting circadian rhythm on a cellular level. You're interrupting those hormone pulses, and you are compromising your ability to build lean mass, to recover, and to sleep well. So when we bring it into that performance and what are your end goals perspective, it really allows women to say, oh, wait, okay, I need to eat to fuel to get to where I want to be. And once we start explaining that if you eat more, you actually lose more body fat and build muscle, and you can attain the aesthetics that you want. And it's like a mind shift, like, what, I need to eat more? Right. It's like, yes, let's try this. Let's try eating more. Let's try fueling for each session and having some recovery. See how your energy levels are. See how you feel. And when they experience that and have the buy-in, they're like, why have I not been doing this?
Right. I feel like there's a thought that, or a sensation, feeling that the muscle tone feels bulky to them. That's how they identify. I'll never forget this story. Someone I worked with put someone through an intense body weight session, and the woman came in and said, "Look at my arms; they're huge. I can't believe my arms are so big." This was the next day, and I know it sounds a bit dramatic, but I was thinking, she wasn't even someone I was working with. I said, if it was that easy, we'd all be retired, living in castles and mansions, right?
It'd be so really awesome, right?
Yeah, it's really not that easy. I'm telling you, you're just really sore, So
yeah.
I feel that there's once again a phobia of feeling lean, feeling tight, feeling like there's probably significant difference in sensations from going from 25% body fat to like 18 or 17, which is pretty low for a female, right?
Yeah, and weight on the scale too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, we know that fat doesn't weigh as much as muscle, so your clothes might be looser, but yet the weight on the scale is higher, and people start to freak out. It's like, I really hate when we're looking at just weight on the scale. I want people to get a DEXA. As I've seen so many DEXAs recently where women look really lean and they're the cardio queens, and you're like, you have as much visceral fat as someone who does no exercise, and your bone density is so low, and you have the beginnings of sarcopenia. Like, none of that is healthy. You're not going to be able to progress unless we take care of this. And so that's eye-opening, because they're like, oh, I'm at my ideal weight and look how lean I am. It's like, but you're not healthy. And you're not going to have a really good health span when we look at the numbers in your DEXA.
Very well said and very informative. I think, why would you say that to me? I want to be happy. This makes me happy. It's more like it's not sustainable, and those behaviors are making significant contributions to being extremely unhealthy, which will inevitably affect your organs and create illness.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So, I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but there are programs out that they just thrash you every day. Can you just kind of explain to our listeners what's going on, the physiological changes that are happening in the body when you push yourself to the max with those high intensity programs daily?
I'm not afraid to shout them out. Can I?
Yeah. Please, by all means.
Yeah. No, I mean, I have a target on my back because I always talk about how bad things like F45 and Orange Theory and that kind of stuff are, because, and to some extent CrossFit, but CrossFit, you can change things within the system to work for you. So what we're seeing in these kind of Berry boot camps and all these kind of high intensity classes, because high intensity has such the buzz, that people do go every day, but they don't actually hit the metrics they need to. So if we're looking at high intensity, we need to really redefine it and say high intensity is specific. We look at like the Norwegian 4x4, where we have 4 minutes at 80%, right? 4 minute recovery. And you do 4 rounds of that. That's true high intensity. if we're looking at every minute on the minute and then 1 minute recovery between rounds, and you're doing 3 or 4 rounds, that's true high intensity, right? Because you're doing this 10 burpees to target in 1 minute, and then you might have 20 seconds to transition to another one. So when we start looking at things like those really fast moving classes, there's not enough recovery between our exercises, and the actual intensity, you feel smashed because that's what people expect. They feel sweaty and smashed, but the intensity has been around 70 to 75%. So we put that moderate intensity. And when we're looking at moderate intensity, it's not hard enough to create an adaptive change. And it's not easy enough to be recovery. So you stay kind of in this gray zone where we have an increase in our post-exercise cortisol, we feel tired but wired, and we put on body fat. So you'll see these people, men and women, but a lot of women, because they're the ones who are uptaken into the high intensity stuff, they're going day after day and they're not having any kind of results. So it's like, okay, we need to pull back. And I understand that this part of it is social, like you show up for yourself and your friends, and that's great. But if you're paying the money to go to these classes, you need to make it work for you. So maybe we're looking at 3 times a week instead of 5. And we're looking at, if you're going to a CrossFit or some other kind of class, focus on what you want to do. Have a purpose for that class. If you're going and you want to work on the heavy lifting side of things, that's your focus for that class. And you're doing technique or lower type intensity for whatever metabolic conditioning that they have. But you really have to make that work for you. You're paying for the class, make it work for you. Otherwise, you're going to be continuously in this moderate intensity where you just don't get any results unless you're 20 years old.
And to that point, you could get great results just by walking or
Right.
doing something else. Your body just
Yeah.
incredibly responsive, and it's like, wow, this program is working. Sometimes I hate to minimize, but it's like anything would have worked, if you're 20 years old,
I
really.
know.
So
Exactly.
it's really, true, as we both know. I think with the group fitness classes, I think group fitness classes are amazing. As you said, I think when someone gets hammered and they're thrashed and they're sweaty and they walk out of there with that dopamine hit, they're always chasing the dopamine hit, and they don't
Hmm.
realize that that is a brain function, that is not a metabolic body changing function. And as you said, you can go through those classes and put a label on it, say, I'm going to go moderate intensity and ease back a little bit because it's going to be a recovery day. But if you're just doing it all the time, chasing that dopamine hit, I've seen people say, I don't know, my body's not changing. And now I'm depressed because I'm not getting that dopamine hit.
Hmm.
I see it a lot, actually.
Exactly. Yeah. And they end up injured. So soft tissue
Hmm.
injuries come up quite a bit.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then as you said, if someone's training 5 days a week and they want to back off to 2 or 3, which may be so much optimal, I think they feel lazy and they don't understand that. Like, I'm in a market in Miami where everyone trains, but that's not normal. Like, that's not the world. That's not the US. That's Miami. Everyone's
Yeah.
obsessed with how they look. They have to have a six pack. Everyone in the world is taking PEDs. Everyone in the world is taking peptides. And you see, like, just this morning, I was looking left and right and I was thinking, I've never seen so many ripped, superhuman looking people. Now, I know that the exterior is amazing, and I know the inside of the metabolic health could be poor, but just the way everyone looks, it's shocking. That's not normal.
Not
And I think when
normal.
people can't keep up, they feel like they're less, a little bit lazy. I know there's a lot of psychology in there, but it actually may be the best thing for them to ease back.
100%. There was a study that was released yesterday in Nature, and it was looking at a UK biobank of 75,000 people, men and women between the ages of 40 and 60, and looking at all cause mortality, body composition, that kind of stuff. And it disseminated down to some modeling that they use with AI to get the results. And they found that for every 1 minute of high intensity exercise, is equivalent to 53 minutes of low intensity or 9 minutes of moderate intensity. So if you're really looking to invoke change, you want to be able to hit that high intensity. But if you're constantly training, you're never going to get that high intensity. You're just going to be too metabolically and nervous system challenged to hit that high intensity. So, it's our job as fitness professionals to really teach that polarization. We want you to show up with a specific need, and we want you to be able to hit this at 110% and then recovery. I'm sure you experience this where women are like, why do I have 3 minutes recovery? What am I going to do? I'm going to superset. It's like, no, you're not. You're going to sit there.
Yeah.
You're going to sit there because your body needs to recover so that you can hit this high weight again or this load again. And it is complete disconnect between like what sociocultural things have impressed upon women to get an X type body versus what we know from a physiological perspective. And yet what socioculturally men have grown up with recovery is great, pushing heavy loads is great, high intensity is great, recovery is great. So it's really interesting right now when we're starting to see some of the middle bit being questioned by women going, wait, maybe I should be resting. Look, I can hit high intensity. Why was I taught something different? And then they start to self-doubt because it goes against the grain.
If you could take one client and just say, do exactly what I tell you to do with sets, reps, loads, rest intervals, they'd be like, it really wasn't that hard, right? It was like,
Right.
because I did what I needed to do. I didn't crush my soul, and I followed the protocols. I think what happens is by way of they want instant gratification, and they're just not patient enough to understand that significant change does take time.
Yeah.
6 months, a year and a half, 2 years, right? It takes time.
It does. It does. And the other perspective is people don't realize that it also takes time to get overweight and unfit. They're looking at an immediate fix, but it's taken them a year or 2 years or maybe three or more to get to this point. And then all of a sudden they want an overnight fix. It's like, well, now we have to backtrack and understand that it's going to take a significant amount of time to
Right.
get to where you want to be. But yeah,
Right.
we're in that immediate gratification mode
Yeah.
and world where everyone's like, I want it now.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Going back to intensities,
Hmm.
you mentioned the Norwegian 4x4, which is something that I had not a debate, but a conversation about this morning. And the fact that you brought it up is amazing. They were saying, have you ever heard of this? And I'm like, yeah, of course I've heard of
Yeah.
it. But I was thinking, that's not a normal workout, number one. Secondly, the way you have to push yourself during the 4 minute effort is extraordinary.
Yeah.
And I was trying to articulate the fact that a lot of people may not have I know you push yourself, and I want you to break this down, but you push yourself to the best of your ability, give your best effort, but some people haven't trained enough to know what their best effort is. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'll teach it through rating and perceived exertion, just like you teach heavier lifting with reps in reserve, right? So it
Hmm.
becomes subjective. A lot of times I'll start people out with a 4x4 by going, okay, for 40 seconds, we're going to push almost like you're sprinting, but not quite. We're going to back it off to
Hmm.
about 90%. And then you're going to have 20 seconds just lower intensity before you hit it again. So the average workload in that four hits about that 80, 85%, but they're
Hmm.
being able to vary it a little bit to get a little bit of recovery before they hit it again. And then they
Hmm.
start to feel what that feels like. So by the time they get to like 3 or 4 weeks down the track of doing this, they're like, now I know what it means to hit 4 minutes
Hmm.
at this pace.
Hmm.
So it
Hmm.
is kind of like working to that level within the 4 minutes and saying, let's back it down, bring it up, back it down, bring it up. They're still pretty gassed, but then we
Hmm.
start working on the pacing within it. But it's not an easy workout at all.
No, no, that's helpful. So is that a once a week protocol?
Yeah, at the most. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's every 10 days, right? So
Mm-hmm.
because it's hard and it's a VO2 type workout, and it's also you have to be pretty recovered to do it. We first start out, it might be once every 2 weeks, might be once every
Mm-hmm.
10 days, but definitely no, as you start getting fitter in that, no more than once a week.
Mm-hmm. Okay, understood. That's great. I can't believe you brought that up because someone said, I'm gonna try this. I said, Just you can work for 4 minutes and rest for four, but I wouldn't suggest pushing yourself to the end of the earth on that four
No,
minutes."
no,
Um,
not at all.
yeah, I said, please don't do that. So with that, are you are you a big? I know Peter Attia, the number one predictor of indicator of long-term health is VO2 max, and I know he has this research. What are your thoughts on VO2 max being one of the indicators of overall long-term longevity and long-term health?
I find it really interesting that it's making the rounds because as
Mm-hmm.
an exercise physiologist, we always use it as a marker for how fit you are in the lab to be able
Mm-hmm.
to, quantify our research participants.
Mm-hmm.
So when we start looking at it as a marker of health, it's really about your capacity, right? We know that if you're fitter and you're fitter going into older age, then yes, you're going to have a better health span. But
Mm-hmm.
this whole push of VO2, really push to get it higher, it's really about let's make sure we can get people to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, to be able to
Mm-hmm.
work at a level that's going to extend that stress so the body adapts. Because I mean, face it, we are inherently lazy as humans. We sit in air conditioned rooms, we have water and food available, so when we start to be uncomfortable, like ugh, but we have to in order to progress. So the
Mm-hmm.
VO2, you can put any name on it. You can say it's an anaerobic threshold workout, it's a VO2 workout, but we have to get people to get into that lactate producing, embracing the suck if we want to have a healthy population as they age.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I'm an indoor rower. I do a lot of indoor rowing,
Yes.
and I've really
Nice.
taken to it. It's awesome. I mean, it's absolutely an obsession for me. I love the numbers. I love everything about it. And there's a group of uh, men that we compete, men and women that compete. As a matter of fact, I think someone that helped me a long time ago when I first started was I think he's from New Zealand. Have you heard of Eric Murray?
Yeah. Yeah. He
Eric
lives down the
Murray?
road.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
He's such a nice guy. He just kind of commented on something on Instagram. He said, "Hey, mate, you could be good at this if you learned how to row."
Yeah. Exactly.
And I
Yeah.
was and I,
It's so
and I was
good,
thinking,
though.
I've been doing this for like 3 years. What are you talking about? And I said, "Who is this
Yeah.
guy?" And I realized he's probably one of the greatest rowers that ever
Rose.
lived. But
Yeah.
he really helped me tremendously. But I realized with rowing that you it really teaches you how to push that lactic acid threshold. So if you there are several signature workouts there, but something that's helped me get the carryover from resistance training to rowing has been I do a protocol where I do a deadlift rep every 5 seconds for 30 minutes. And
Ouch.
and yeah, I mean it's brutal because the one of the signature workouts is max meters for 30 minutes. So
Hmm.
I have to be able to stay in it and really drive out of the catch with the same power and the same wattage. And I feel like there's not enough. I know hit on this before, but there's not enough of the endurance athletes. And I know you were an endurance athlete, correct? Long time, right?
Kind of now, not really. I mean, I
Oh
started
no.
as a rower, and then got
Oh,
into all
okay.
that kind of stuff, right? Now
Okay.
I just yeah, now I love rowing. I'm thinking about getting back on the water, but yeah, we have a
Okay.
rowing erg in our garage,
Oh, awesome.
cycling, gravel
All right.
bike. So yeah, kind
Okay.
of
Awesome.
in between. So I get you, 100%
Okay.
get you. Yeah.
Okay. So I just don't think the endurance athletes do enough of the training that's going to help them carry over to their endurance sport. Would you agree with
Mm-mm.
that?
100%. 100% agree with that. I have a friend who just recently retired from a very long career of triathlon racing, high level professional bike racing. Her sister got her into a little bit of CrossFit. She just did her first High Rocks race and she loved
Oh
it,
wow.
right? And
Wow.
I'm like, well, okay. But now she's like, I really love the high rock circuit. The gym stuff, I'm not quite so sure of. I was like, you are very well proficient in the endurance. You need to get in the strength because you're not going to
Yeah.
progress there unless. And so it's like making those ties. And again, telling like cyclists, you need to be in the gym doing, deadlifts and squats so that you have the power to accelerate on a hill. Or maybe
Mhm.
we're going to do a heavy posterior chain work and then do running hill reps. And the endurance athletes
Oh,
are like, what? I was like, because you want to take that fatigue from the lifting to put into your running economy.
oh, wow.
Because we see that running up a hill is where, as a trail runner towards the end of a race, that's where you lose the most. So if we're working
Mm,
on running economy and strength through that running economy, first we have to load you, get everything potentiated, and then we do our reps. So
mhm,
there's a method to the madness, but you're right. It needs someone on the outside to push into
mhm,
the endurance space to say,
mhm.
look at all these cool things you can do to reduce the total volume and improve the efficiency of your training to make you a better athlete.
It's very interesting what you said. You want to pre-fatigue and then take it to the intervals so you can kind of work through that and work at it in a fatigue state. I've actually never heard that. I've heard it the complete opposite, work on the speed mechanics and then hit the gym.
Mm-hmm.
I've
Yep.
never heard it
So
like that.
So if we're looking at that top end speed, then we don't want to do
Mhm,
the lifting first. But if we're looking at our typical endurance, or hour to 10-hour endurance person, right? They're very
mhm,
weak and
mhm,
they tend to fade or they get into the steady state. And so we want to mix it up to get them better, then it's really about economy of motion and how we're
mhm,
moving efficiently. So if we put them under load and they're getting strong because that's what we need them to do for thinking about doing the gym work first for the strength and power development, and then topping that off with just a few running interval, could be on the treadmill, it could be outside on the hill, could be going out and doing hill reps on your bike. Then you're taking the strength and fatigue into the back half of your race. And this is where people start to fail. So if we're teaching you to be very economical in your movement under fatigue in the to simulate the back half of your race, you're going to be able to be just as strong, if not stronger, and really get away from your competitors.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting. Do you think the neglect of the strength work in the endurance athletes is from a fear of getting bulky once again, or too big or too strong, which is crazy, but um, or just not making enough time to incorporate it to that training portfolio?
Not putting the emphasis on it, saying, oh, it's going to make my legs too tired to be able to
Mhm.
do these intervals. I don't have enough time. I have to work on recovery and mobility. And then when you're like, well, how much volume are you doing? Because of the mentality of, oh, I have to ride, 18 hours or 15 hours a week to be a really competitive bike
Mhm.
racer, or I need to be able to run 80K per week to be a competitive marathoner. It's like, no, you don't.
Mhm.
The reason why you're doing all of that is because you're trying to avoid fatigue. But if we're able to build strength and stability and avoid injury and also get you strong for the back half, it's a win win. So part of it's education, trying to reframe it for people. And then it's
Mhm.
also the long history of strength being too much of a competitor for the performance variables that a lot of endurance athletes are after.
Okay, understood. Um, Wearables. What are your thoughts on wearables? Apple Watch, Whoop. I know Garmin heart rate monitors.
Yeah. For men, they're great. But when we're
Mm-hmm.
looking at it for women, you can use it to track trends over time, but the
Mm-hmm.
algorithms don't capture female physiology properly.
Mm-hmm.
Even
Mm-hmm.
things like our beat to beat is a little bit different from a
Mm-hmm.
millisecond standpoint. And over the series of 24 hours, it's read as an anomaly in the algorithms
Mm-hmm.
in these wearables. And
Mm-hmm.
things like progesterone changes our autonomic nervous system. So after ovulation, when progesterone comes up, your resting heart rate comes up, your respiratory rate comes up, your heart rate variability drops. And that's read as being poorly recovered by the wearable, but it's not actually a true indication of stress resilience or if you are recovered or not. So I tell women, I'm like, use the wearables for trends over time. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any of my athletes have access to their wearable information the week before a key event because of the psychological stuff. Like you could wear it and you feel like you had a great night's sleep, and you look
Oh
at the
yeah.
outcome, it's like you slept like shit. And then all of a sudden you feel tired. You're like, no, Don't pay
Yeah.
attention to that. How do you
Yeah.
feel? Right?
Yeah. That's so true. Sometimes I wake up and I'm like, I feel terrible. And I'm like 90% recovered. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Like,
Right.
and then sometimes I've been in the red, 18% recovered. And I said, I feel amazing right now. And then I look down at my Whoop and I'm like, oh man, now I feel
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah. You're like, damn, I have to
That's
reschedule what
so
I was
real.
doing. Yeah.
That's so real. Is there one, have you experimented with the I like the Whoop for just tracking my sleep. I do.
Hmm.
Is there one that you suggest or are you just kind of
Well,
neutral?
yeah, just because I have some really good friends who are sleep researchers, and they've been in my
Okay.
ear about how poor the trackers are for actually measuring the different sleep stages. If you're looking
Mm,
at overall sleep time and the amount of awakenings that you have, then that's
mm,
okay. You can use that. But when you're looking at how much time you spend in REM versus slow wave, the wearables are not accurate enough to pick that up.
okay. Okay. Understood. Um, I guess I'd like to get into specific tools, or let me just say this first. I maybe we hit on supplements first.
Mhm.
Supplements that are absolutely essential for the female, just female in training, female in life, and what you suggest?
I tell, if you have all of your nutrition nailed down, then
Mm,
we can start looking at supplementation. If you're following a strict diet and you're missing out on some of our micronutrients, then we have to address that. If we're looking at a generalization, then of course creatine is going to come in, right? We hear all the buzz about creatine. I've
yeah.
talked about it ad nauseum because it's so important for brain health, for muscle function, for performance, for recovery, for gut health.
Hmm.
And women produce less and eat less than men anyway. So a small
Hmm.
supplementation is great. We look at omega-3 fatty acids as well for cellular integrity. And not so much for you in Miami, but for those of us who are in the different polar opposites like UK, New Zealand, Australia,
Hmm.
we have,
Hmm.
and even the middle of the country of the US, where you have very dark periods of winter and low vitamin D. Then you have to think about, well, supplementing with vitamin D, especially in the darker months of the year.
Hmm. Okay. Understood. And how do you feel? Just so I'm thinking general pop needs to hear this. Is there, I know you said you want to meet your nutritional needs. That's the most important thing. Then you can start talking about supplementation. I gotta
But it
ask,
doesn't
protein.
happen,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It doesn't
No, it never
happen.
happens. It never happens. People are like, you know what? It's like, I can't tell you how many times I'll give you an analogy. It's like, hey, I can't eat fruit. I'm like, you
Why?
can't eat fruit. I've seen you vape. I've seen you pound two Red Bulls. It's not the fruit. Fruit is not your problem. Like fruit's okay, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
but
exactly.
I don't even want to waste time on it. I'm like, if that's your rationale, you can't unbake that apple. Um,
Yeah.
but how about protein powders? Like, and I'm
Mhm.
talking like something really sifted through that's high quality, that reputable company.
Absolutely. Because when
Yeah.
we're looking at the higher protein needs, it is a supplement, right? So
Mhm.
unfortunately, people tend to be too full before they get all of their protein needs. If they're
Mhm.
looking at getting all the fiber they need and all the macronutrients and micronutrients. So if we're looking
Mhm.
at a protein powder that's really clean and well vetted, then it's a really easy way of getting that extra protein in at different eating intervals. Or
Okay.
for that first thing in the morning when you're not hungry, you're like, oh, I
Yeah.
can't eat anything.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you do you any ones that you favor?
It depends on where I am in the country or in the
Okay.
world.
Okay.
Uh, I'll default to momentous, unflavored
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah, they
in the
do a great job.
States. Yeah,
Great
they do a
job.
great job. And it's harder to get. So if I run out, then there is a smaller company here in New Zealand that sells high quality, unflavored protein
Hmm.
powders.
Okay. Um, I have to ask, I know we're talking about nutrition, we're bouncing around with fueling. I have a dear friend. She's a nutritionist. She does a great job. And I posted some of our team members, they wanted to do a 3-day fast. So I said, whatever, I'll do a 3-day water fast with you guys. She was like, no, don't do that. That's terrible for you. What are your thoughts on fasting, specific to the female athlete or a trained individual? Are you a fan of intermittent fasting days? What are your
No.
thoughts?
Um,
Not at all.
I'll have to frame it with time restricted eating versus intermittent fasting.
Okay.
If we, again, because of chronobiology and circadian rhythm and the tight tie that we have to hormone pulses and endocrine health, right?
Hmm.
Time restricted eating is fine, where you eat through the day to fuel yourself, having protein, fiber at almost every eating opportunity. You have
Hmm.
dinner, and then you don't have anything after dinner. So you have like 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed with no food. Then you wake up, and then for women, having food within a half an hour or so after you wake up. So you end up with a 12, 13-hour fast overnight. That's
Okay.
great. But we
Okay.
see from the research, specifically for women, when they start holding a fast till noon or after, they start having a dysregulation of their appetite hormone. And how this happens in a kind of a day scenario is in the afternoon after they've had their first meal, they end up moving less incidentally and craving more simple carbohydrates. So subsequently, they start eating more of the simple carbohydrates. They're craving the caffeine and the sugar. And then they start eating until like 10 or 11 at night because they can't get rid of that craving. And then they go to bed and they don't have a good sleep because they're sleeping on a stomach that should be empty and it's not. So it really dysregulates sleep and it becomes this vicious cycle. For men, it's not quite the same because there's different neuropeptides that are activated in men and women that can control appetite and nutrition density. So men can get away with some of the more nuanced fasts that are out there, but for
Okay.
women, not so much.
Okay. Okay. You brought up a good point. It messes with their cravings in general. I just wanted to, you mentioned caffeine. Now, I was thinking, what are your thoughts on caffeine? How do you use caffeine? What is okay in regards to how much caffeine? And then what is the downside of caffeine? Because everyone kind of pushes their narrative. They say, oh, caffeine's great for your training, it's great for cognitive thought. And then I see people having 1,000 milligrams of caffeine throughout the day that can cause a serious problem. What are your thoughts
Absolutely.
on
Yeah.
caffeine?
It is more of a genetic thing because we have
Mhm.
responders, non-responders, and
Right.
over-responders. So I'm
Right.
someone who could have a double espresso right before they go to bed, and there's no problem. And then
Mhm.
you have other people like, I can't have a coffee after 10 a.m. because then I'm up all night. So you have to
Right.
know how you respond. In general,
Right.
I think there's an overabundance of caffeine use because it's in all the energy drinks, it's in a lot of the sports foods, it's in the espresso drinks, that kind of stuff. And we see that when you have sleep deprivation or you're not able to adequately sleep because the adenosine receptors are stimulated by caffeine, that you
Mhm.
end up having less focus and awareness in the day because your
Mhm.
brain hasn't been able to do its proper cleaning while it's sleeping. So it starts
Mhm.
doing that in the day. So you'll have an
Mhm.
attention lapse, and then you start using more caffeine and perpetuates the problem. And if we're trying to have kind of a caffeine reset, and some of the research that's come out just this month, we see that if you don't have caffeine after 2 p.m., and we're looking at maybe no more than 500 milligrams in the first part of the day, then you can
Okay.
have a caffeine reset. You might have that really lull and awful headachy kind of thing for the first 3 days in the afternoon, but
Mhm.
then your brain is able to do what it needs to do while it's sleeping. And then you
Okay.
start to have less of a reliance or need in the later afternoon. If you're
Mhm.
training late at night and you need caffeine to train, then we have to really think about it. I have a lot of people
Mhm.
like, oh, I need this pre workout. I'm like, why? You get the
Yeah.
training stress from the loads that you can lift. And if you're using a pre workout, you could be compromising blood flow to the muscle because you're
Mhm.
so or constricted from the caffeine and everything else that's
Yeah.
in it. You're not going to be able to maximize. Yes, from a
Mhm.
cognitive and a energy standpoint, you might be more alert, but what is that doing from a whole body system that's going to improve your lifts and improve the training stress load that's happening, as well as the interference in sleep that's essential for
Mhm.
recovery?
That's great. You basically answered my next question about energy drinks. Is there ever a place for an energy drink?
Yeah, I mean, you can use it strategically. I have endurance athletes who use it strategically in race situations where they
Mm-hmm.
need a hit of caffeine and sugar
Mm-hmm.
in the later stages. If you are coming off shift work and you need to do your training right after shift work, we know that there's
Yeah.
a little bit of a misstep in metabolism
Yeah.
and cognition. Well, you might look at using half strength of an energy drink because then you're getting some
Mm-hmm.
glucose and some caffeine without overstimulation. So there
Mm-hmm.
are definitely some times, but I look at like I live across the street from elementary and a high school. They're both side by side. And the elementary kids will see the high school kids drinking energy drink after energy drink. And they're like, oh, should I be drinking that? And it's like, no, you shouldn't. Even the high schoolers shouldn't be drinking it.
No.
It's not a Coke. It's not a, a sparkling water. It's like Celsius or, monster drinks and all that kind of stuff. It's like, no,
Oof,
it's not
oof.
appropriate.
I would think like I don't think I experienced caffeine till I was in my 30s. And I was like, I could use some caffeine now.
Yeah.
But I was so, I guess, energetic or excited or hyped up that caffeine would have sent me off the rails. Like
Yeah.
I don't think I could take more. I guess that's what I'm saying. But you mentioned, Dr. Sims, that you could have an espresso before you go to bed. I actually did that, the saliva test. And
Mhm.
with that test, it said I was a fast absorber as well. I could have it, but I thought part of that was my when your body gets so used to the caffeine intake, and then it becomes less responsive. Are we
Mhm.
training it that way, or is that, as you said, purely genetic?
Combination. So
Okay.
you're going to be a fast metabolizer, so you're going to be able to have caffeine and get rid of it quickly. But
Mm,
your brain and the adenosine receptors that respond to the caffeine are going to get used to that boost. And so just like we were
mm,
talking about earlier, where people get the dopamine hit from a smash class, you're going to get
mm,
that high from caffeine, and then it's gonna fade a lot faster. So then it's like I need more, I need more. That's when I was
mm.
talking about our caffeine reset, and you have like the lull and the headache for the first 3 or 4 days when you're trying to reset. It's
Yeah.
because your brain's trying to readjust to a lower caffeine load.
Okay. Understood. Understood. Um, I'd like to go back to the menstrual cycle for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Um, are there specific days within the menstrual cycle where you're just you should not be training? Like, don't train, and then what are the days that you are optimal at this point when you're tracking the menstrual cycle?
From a health standpoint, there's never a day where you can't train
Okay.
when we're looking at it that way. And this is where we have to look at the individual and their own lived experience because I can say that, but if it's day 2 of a woman's cycle and she is bloated, cramping, and having a heavy bleed, she's not going to want to train. So
Right.
that's where we start looking at the psychological and the physiological and how they meet. So we see that there is a subset of women who have really bad pain on ovulation and they just can't train at all. But then the next day they feel bulletproof. It's like, okay,
Hmm.
well, you could use that as a marker of, okay, this is going to suck. I have ovulatory pain. But the next day I'm going to push hard because I know that I can. So there
Okay.
isn't a day where you shouldn't, and there isn't a day where you should. It comes down to how you are experiencing your own hormone flux.
Hmm. And would I guess that you already answered. I was going to say you're more strength training would be more forgiving, interval work may be more forgiving, or cardio work may be more forgiving. I've actually worked with women before and they say, you know what, I just can't strength train today. I'm going to do some cardio work, some
Mm-hmm.
light cardio work just to get blood flowing, and that would be optimal for that day based on how they feel on that day.
Yep, 100%.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. 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 Wanted to touch on overall the importance of bone health.
Mm-hmm.
And you said earlier, you mentioned, the beginning stages of osteopenia. And I just think that that's not something that's talked about in the training world today.
No, and unfortunately, with the more sedentary lifestyle that we have, we see it with our kids, We're seeing earlier ages of osteopenia and low bone density because they're not moving around and running around in their teenage years where we start to put on peak bone mass. So we're having an incidence of women and men in their 30s with low bone density because of the lack of stimulation and development they had when they were growing up. So when we're looking at bone and bone strength, that's part of the lean mass and lean mass development, right? So if we're doing heavy loads or strength training, we're pulling on the bone, then you're going to build bone density. But we see the best way to build bone quickly is through a high load jump training. So not like our plyometric box jumps, but it's a very low height and you're hitting it hard. So no longer are we absorbing with our muscles, we're absorbing with our bones. And it's that multi-directional stress that is going to create the impetus to build bone. And it only takes 10 minutes, maybe 2 to 3 times a week. You could put it in a warm-up if you're doing jump rope warm-up. You're landing hard. Pogos are great for it, right? Wow. So all these things that can be implemented into a gym session is going to help with bone density.
Okay. It's interesting. Like there was a presentation going on at one of our locations, and a young man was presenting. He did a great job. His name is Ryan, and I was just watching him move. And he was much younger, but he was just bounding and just jumping, and I was just jealous of the way he moved. And I was thinking, like, that would be so painful for me right now. And I consider myself a pretty decent athlete, but I guess that's one of my questions. You want the bones to absorb the force, but there's a lot of joint issues in the joints. Like, you may have knee pain. I've had 6 knee surgeries on my left knee, 2 on my right knee. Oof. And I run, I row, I squat, I deadlift. I have to make modifications in regards to range at times, but there are certain things like repetitive bouts of jumping. It's very hard on me. So it's interesting. You want to get the bones to absorb the force, but joints absorb everything. So what's the happy medium there?
Yeah, I know. I have knee surgery in 2 weeks, so I'll be right there with you.
Oh, jeez. Good luck.
Thanks. Yeah, so this is where we look at the low load stuff, right? So if you're having a very low depth jump and absorbing, but if you really can't jump because of knees and hips and issues that way, then we can look at some other force absorbing. So maybe we're doing med ball slam and catch against the wall, right? So you're slamming it and then you're catching it as it comes back, you're absorbing the force that way. Okay. You can also look at doing some of our hand release push-ups, right? So as you come down, you're releasing and then you're accelerating again. So you're getting some of the absorption. So there's other modifications, but we see when we explain jump training and having that impact through the skeleton, it does put a lot of people off. They're like, but I have low back pain, I have hip pain, I have knee issues, I can't jump, I've got pelvic floor issues. It's like, okay, well, let's see where you are, and then let's see what kind of modifications we can do. But it's all about the skeleton absorbing the force.
Okay. That's very helpful. We moved down the road, and now I'm going to be working with someone who's moving into menopause, perimenopause. What type of adjustments need to be made and what needs to be accounted for to make sure that we keep them on a really, really positive training plan?
We want to start early, for one, and we see some of the biggest changes that happen in mid-perimenopause, because you'll have women who are like, I'm starting to feel tired but wired, I'm having poor sleep, bit of anxiety, but they haven't quite had body composition change yet. So we want to keep gut microbiome very diverse, because there's a significant decrease in our gut bugs because we're starting to have a loss of our sex hormones. And our sex hormones have a second pass that they go to our intestines, and our gut bugs unconjugate them and shoot them back out. So when we start losing our sex hormones, we start losing diversity. And unfortunately, because women are tired but wired and sympathetically driven in mid to late perimenopause, they also tend to grow the kind of bugs that thrive on that, which are simple carbohydrate, obesogenic type bugs. So the very first thing is like, let's make sure you're eating lots of complex, colorful fruit and veg and whole grains. And that's what we want. We also want high protein. Then we look from a training perspective. As I said earlier, one of the things that happens is a dysregulation of myosin. So in order to counter what's happening from a systemic standpoint of everything weakening with a loss of estrogen and progesterone, we have to look at how are we applying loads to create more of a central nervous system and a tissue response for tissue tendon, tissue tension, rather than looking at let's do our typical training and get estrogen to help with recovery. So we're looking at the lower ends of the, like I was describing earlier, our power-based ends, our explosive movements. We can look at French contrast. We can look at putting some plyo moves in there that will help with some bone strength as well as maintaining power. And then polarizing intensity. We need women who are in their peri and postmenopausal years to stay out of that moderate intensity, to put in true high intensity, some sprint intervals, and then they have their soul food, right? Because most women who are peri postmenopause now always default to walking, or, I'm calories in, calories out. I want to go for my long, slow distance, whatever. And that's not what we need to do, because women, by the nature of being XX, are already really, really good at being a fat burner and being an endurant person, that we need to make sure that we're working those fast twitch fibers. We are producing lactate for brain health so that we can keep our cognitive decline at bay. We want to, get myosin functioning well. We need that through the early stages of power development and strength development. So those are the critical factors. And it is complete mind switch from what everyone's grown up with of let's do long, slow stuff. Let's look
Right.
at our fat burning, all that kind of stuff. It's like,
Right.
no.
I feel like it's transitioned to that just because it's forgiving, and it becomes like, okay, at least I can get this in, and this is still good for me. Like, movement is medicine, and this is healthy for me. Knowing that, I feel like based off everything you just said, the youth strength and conditioning camps where they're bounding and they're jumping and they're doing all ladder. I feel like every person needs to be in that from 40, 50, 60. I really do.
Yeah,
You know,
I agree.
and
I
yeah,
agree. Yeah. I was on a speaking tour in Australia a couple of weeks ago, and everyone was like, "How do you get your guns?" And I was like, "Well, you know what? A long history, but because I've been on the road so much this year, heavy farmers carries, right? So heavy farmers carries, one, it helps you with your posture, and you say that everyone sits up, pulls their shoulder back, right? It helps you learn how to walk properly. It also
yeah,
puts a lot of tension in on your arms and your shoulders. So of
yeah, yeah,
course you're
yeah,
going
yeah.
to be able to build all of that. And it doesn't take a lot of time.
Hmm. Absolutely. Um, is there a someone trains during the sympathetic, then is there a specific timetable balance formula that says for every hour you spend in the sympathetic, you need to spend 3 hours in the parasympathetic? Or is it, I've always believed that if I push myself for an hour and I'm in the sympathetic and I'm really revved up and I'm pushing, I need to do everything possible to get myself back to the parasympathetic as much as possible until I want to go back to the sympathetic. There was no specific grid or timetable. Are you aware of one?
No, I'm not. But we see
Okay.
that so many people are sympathetically driven.
Hmm.
And when it comes time to like wind down for sleep, where you need a parasympathetic, they don't know how to get into it. So it's
Okay.
always like, okay, well, let's practice some of that being time in nature that can help drive parasympathetic responses, social connection, and also taking that mindfulness. Maybe there's 10 minutes first thing in the morning where everything's super quiet and no noise. So you think about we're bombarded by noise all of the time, and that's a sympathetic driver. Like you get in the car and you turn the radio on, and then you have all the noises around you. It's like, let's see what happens when you drive 10 minutes with no radio. Of course, you have road rage outside, which isn't
Yeah.
that helpful, but we have to find times and nuances where we can just turn off that sound and then
Yeah.
remember what that feels like so that we can bring that with us when we do need to have that parasympathetic.
Yeah. I really cherish the early morning hours. I mean, early where
Mm-hmm.
it's silence. I love it.
Yes,
I think
me
it's the
too.
best time. The best.
No one else up in the house, no one's
Nothing.
outside.
Yeah, yeah.
You're like, it's very
Yeah.
quiet. Love
It's
it.
the best. I mean, it's really priceless.
Mm.
Um, so thoughts on hormone replacement therapy? When should it be started? I mean,
Yeah.
I
It's a
hear so
big
much
thing, isn't it?
conflicting. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
huge. It's huge.
Yeah, it
What are
is
your
huge.
thoughts?
So when I was at Stanford doing my postdoc, one of the women that I was working with was the PI for the Women's Health Initiative. So I've
Okay.
seen what's happened with all the, the backlash of hormone replacement therapy, menopause hormone therapy, and how the pendulum's gone like this, right? And then you have everyone who's a subset saying everyone needs to be on it. But we have to think of it as we don't have long-term data on it, and it's definitely a useful tool in perimenopause, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the way that I look at it is if you're going to use menopause hormone therapy, it's not the type of medication you're going to take that's going to stop all of the symptoms and changes that are occurring. You have to have the lifestyle stuff in there too. You have to be doing the resistance training. You have to be doing the higher protein. You have to be putting an emphasis on sleep and social connection. If you are having significant symptomology, then menopause hormone therapy helps. Definitely. It's been shown to do that. If you're not having overt problems, then it's something that you might want to consider, but you don't have to take it. I think that's the disconnect right there, where there's so much pressure to be on it, but no one's coming out saying you don't have to take it. If you feel like you need to, then have a discussion with someone who's very well in the know of the different formulations, how old you are, how close you are to menopause, or are you early or late perimenopause? Do you have the APOE4 gene, which is a gene for Alzheimer's? We know that starting menopause hormone therapy early stages helps attenuate Alzheimer risk, but it doesn't if you don't necessarily have that gene. So there's so many things about it. It comes down to the individual. So yeah, and I'm glad to see that the whole pendulum is starting to come back down in the middle, where people are starting to hear more, getting more educated, understanding that it is a pharmaceutical that can be very helpful, but it's not something that you have to use, and don't have FOMO if you're not using it.
Recovery. I know you have some sauna, cold water immersion. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, yeah. Are you talking about the shitstorm that I created with cold water immersion?
I mean, I must have received that. I enjoy there was a point where I was doing the cold water immersion like every day, and then I realized, why am I doing this every day? And I
Yeah.
realized why I was doing it because it was a dopamine hit, and I felt great, and it was a high, and I realized I really didn't need it. And years ago, I would say maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I was doing it post training, and we know like the downside of that. So, and then it made perfect sense once I rethought it. I said, "Uh-oh, I've been making a big mistake." So I do appreciate cold water immersion,
Hmm.
um, but I don't live and die and say you absolutely must do it. I feel like there's benefits for me, but
Hmm.
it's aside from. I'm not looking to do. I'm not doing cold water immersion for fat loss. I'm not doing cold water immersion for to see changes in my body. I'm doing it for a dopamine hit and just feels good on my joints. That's it. What are your
Yeah, and
thoughts?
so when we look at the research, we see that there is definitive sex differences in thermoregulation, both hot and cold.
Mhm.
So when we're looking at the ice water baths and the cold water plunge that's so cold, we know that it is not appropriate for women. It creates more of a sympathetic response, and we don't get any of the metabolic and parasympathetic responses. We see that if women are hitting around that 50 to 55 degree Fahrenheit, so about that 14 degrees Celsius, you can
Mhm.
start to see some of those benefits that men get with the ice. When
Okay.
we talk about sauna and sauna exposure, women do better in the heat because over the course of the menstrual cycle, body naturally changes, core temperature changes about 1 degree Celsius across the two phases. So you have this natural change in your thermoregulatory set points. So when a woman gets in the sauna, she can sit in there for a longer period of time as her body is absorbing the heat before she starts to sweat. And I always use the example of myself and my husband after a workout. We get in the sauna, and after 20 minutes, I'm just starting to warm up. After 10, he's like, I got to get out of here. I'm dying of heat. And it's like, okay, tolerance here, right? And we see that if you're using heat after training, it creates a longer time of training stress. So you can use it for cardiovascular advantage. But again, there are some people who absolutely hate heat and can't handle it and love the cold. Or you have people who love the heat and can't handle the cold. So if you're going to use environmental extremes, they can both be beneficial, but you have to know your personal preference and when to use it. So if we're looking at using sauna, are we using it for health benefits? Are we using for training benefits? Are we using for acclimatization benefits? So there are 3 different protocols for that. If we're looking at open water swimming, I'll have a lot of my women do cold water, face immersion, so that when they dive into ocean or lake or river that's really cold, they don't get a vagal response. So it's a conditioning effect. If they're doing it for health reasons, then it's cool water. So there's a time and a place, but we have to know the purpose, and we have to know the individual preference, and we have to know the why and rationale behind it. Yeah, and this is a construct of the system, and we see that, it's always a male body default. Even when we're talking about coaching kids at the Little League or soccer and stuff, right? It's always the boy model, the male model. I mean, we see things like girl push up or run like a girl, and the girls are derogatory. So it's just kind of come like ensconced in our society that we don't really need to pay attention to that. We just need to get people to move. When we start looking at the nuances, we see that when we start accepting the fact that there are sex differences and educating and teaching and training our teenage girls differently from our teenage boys, we have better uptake in sport, we have less injury, we have better self-efficacy and self-esteem. And these are the things that there are small trials that are starting to be rolled out, but it takes a huge amount of work to change the entire system. We also see, over the $460 billion that was spent on research last year, only 1% of that was spent on all of women's health research. So if you think about everything that goes into women's health research, you're going to have the big, like cancer and Alzheimer's is going to take the bulk of it. We're not going to look at the activity levels and the small things like PCOS and endometriosis that have a big drain because it's not in that top tier. So we have a lot of work to expand the funding capabilities, to expand the education. We are working on it, and we have some really cool platforms that are coming out that's going to work to close that gap in the next about 6 months.
Okay. Understood. Is there anything that's, trending now that we haven't covered that you'd like to hit on that would be really informative for our listeners? I have a lot of people who train daily, and they really want to they call themselves biohackers, and this is their life is training and health and wellness. Is there anything that you'd like to hit on that we haven't hit on?
Yeah, the whole longevity space is really interesting, right? Because we're seeing all this stuff come out about taking rapamycin, methylene blue, NAD, all these things. Not a lot of research behind it, but 2, most of the research that's being done in the longevity space is on the very top tier, upper middle class, rich white guy or sedentary population. So there's a very small amount of research that's being done on perpetually active individuals, because we know that exercise, by the nature of being a stress, creates an epigenetic change. So if we're looking at someone who's been doing bodybuilding and strength training their whole life, telling them that they need to do 2 to 3 days of resistance training for longevity is going to be nothing, right? So when we're starting to take on all of this information about longevity, we have to very much take with that eye open of what is this population? Is it really beneficial for me? Do I need to be doing this? What do I need to be doing? Because that space is becoming very loud and confusing. And again, we're seeing that the people that are shouting it out the most tend to be that upper population that doesn't really have much application to female population or general population.
Mention NAD and methylene blue. What are your thoughts on the 2?
I put them in the categories. If you don't have all of the things and the pillars taken care of, it's a waste of time and money. We
Hmm.
see things like NAD. If you exercise, then you are more than taking care of your NAD and ADH replication needs and cellular health. So again, when we're looking at all the information that's coming out about it, it's based on sedentary population who doesn't exercise, who isn't perpetually going through an aerobic metabolic system, right, where NAD is really important, doesn't have the
Hmm.
cofactors for it. So again, it's like, what is the population? Where's the information coming from? And there really are no robust studies done on it in humans. There's a lot of rat studies, but not a lot of human studies. So again, it's like, save your money. Let's make sure that we're consistent. Let's make sure we're sleeping well. And then we can look at all the things that are available to optimize and if it is appropriate for you and your lifestyle.
Okay. Peptides in the same bucket?
Uh, you know, I want to say yes, but I've been seeing some really interesting stuff come out in human trials. I'm like, let's hold that space there.
Hmm.
We know that there's something there if WADA bans them because of some of
Hmm.
the effects that are there.
Yeah.
I would like to see some tighter controlled trials, but I don't think they're completely off the mark, especially when we're looking at soft tissue injuries and reparation.
Hmm. Okay. To wrap up, what would be the most important message you'd like to pass to, and I want to say it, I have a niece and she's in high school. She's a freshman. She loves softball. She trains very hard. I'm very proud of her. She's a straight A student, and she loves health, wellness, fitness. What what message would you like to pass toward to young women in today's world?
I want them to take up space because I say this because my daughter is newly 13 and I've watched her go from being like, let's take up space and own it and fight for ourselves and fight for the things that we believe in, to not coming up and saying anything. She's lost the ability to take up space. And so when I say take up space, I want women who are like your niece, very involved in sport and health and wellness, to not give up the lifting platform for someone else who's lifting there. Just own it, take it, own it. Also, when we're looking at information that's coming out that's pushing back on women, especially in political climates of today globally, to just take a pause and say, is this appropriate for me to be pushed back on or not? Can I keep going the way I'm going? To take that moment to pause, take up the space, and keep progressing, because eventually science is going to catch up. And so just don't let people push you backwards. And I think that if it holds true for young men too, right? Because we're seeing a backlash in young men too. So for all of our young athletes, I just want them to be confident to take up space and to keep fulfilling the whole health journey that they're on.
What a great message! I can't thank you enough. This was awesome. You're awesome.
No,
Thank
thanks.
you for just informing us all and spreading good messages that will inevitably help everyone. Thank you very, very much. I really, really appreciate it. And please, good luck with your knee surgery.
Oh,
Thank you so
thanks.
much. Yeah.
Thank